Wrestling has always been about spectacle. The lights, the music, the crowd roaring at the top of their lungs. It makes you believe the men and women in the ring are almost untouchable. To millions of fans, WWE superstars seemed like superheroes who could never fade, never slow down, and never walk away from the chaos of the squared circle. Yet behind the larger-than-life personas, every wrestler is still human. And like all of us, life eventually takes them down new paths. For many fans, it's hard to imagine their favorite stars anywhere outside the spotlight. These were the people who performed in sold-out arenas, who gave interviews on prime-time television, who had their faces plastered on posters and video games. Seeing them now working regular jobs feels surreal. And that contrast is exactly what makes these stories so fascinating. The transition from the chaos of fame to the normalcy of everyday life. Think about it. You spend years watching someone like a mighty powerhouse slamming opponents in the ring, only to later find out he now owns a local construction company. Or you recognize a former women's champion working as a motivational speaker, standing in front of classrooms instead of wrestling rings. These shifts remind us how unpredictable life can be, no matter how famous someone once was. There's also a very human side to it. Wrestling is tough on the body. Years of constant travel, injuries, and pressure to perform take a heavy toll. Not every superstar can transition into acting, commentary, or corporate WWE roles. Some choose quieter lives, finding peace in careers that may seem ordinary to us, but bring them balance. From teachers to firefighters, chefs to personal trainers. These are roles that connect them to everyday people in ways wrestling never could. What's truly captivating is how these normal jobs give fans a chance to see their heroes in a different light. They're not just entertainers anymore. They're neighbors, co-workers, and mentors. And in some ways, that makes them even more inspiring, because it proves that life doesn't stop when the curtain falls. Sometimes that's when a whole new story begins. In this journey, we're going to explore the lives of 15 famous WWE wrestlers who stepped away from the squared circle and stepped into jobs that none of us expected. Some of these stories will shock you, some will make you smile, and others might even inspire you to think differently about your own career path. After all, if legends who once performed in front of millions can start fresh, it shows us that reinvention is possible for anyone. So, buckle in. What you're about to hear is more than just a list of wrestlers with unusual jobs. It's a collection of human stories about resilience, change, and the surprising places life can take us once the spotlight fades. When fans think back to the early 2000s, one name that always sparks curiosity is Maven. He wasn't just another superstar climbing the ranks. He was the very first winner of WWE's Tough Enough, the reality competition that promised to turn everyday athletes into global wrestling stars. His big break came in 2001, and for a short time, he looked destined for greatness. The image of Maven drop-kicking The Undertaker out of the Royal Rumble still lives rent-free in the minds of longtime fans. It was a jaw-dropping moment, a signal that maybe this fresh face had the potential to become a household name. But wrestling, like life, doesn't always go according to plan. While Maven had some spotlight moments, his career never quite skyrocketed the way many thought it would. Injuries, backstage politics, and the constant challenge of breaking through in an era dominated by larger-than-life legends made it difficult. By 2005, his WWE run came to an end, leaving fans wondering what happened to the young star who once shocked The Undertaker himself. What makes Maven's story fascinating isn't just the rise and fall in wrestling. It's what came next. Instead of clinging to the spotlight, Maven walked away from the chaos of the wrestling world and chose something completely different. He entered the corporate world and, for a time, even worked as a financial planner. Later, in one of the most surprising career turns of any wrestler, Maven found a job as a sales associate at a local company. For fans used to seeing him on national television, spotting him behind a desk or interacting with clients felt surreal. And yet, That's what makes this chapter of Maven's life so interesting. He represents the reality that not every wrestler ends up in Hollywood or training the next generation or staying connected to the industry forever. Sometimes they walk away completely, choosing stability and normalcy over the unpredictable roller coaster of fame. For Maven, the transition wasn't glamorous, but it was real. He became part of the everyday workforce, blending into society like anyone else. But there's also an inspiring angle here. For a man who once had millions of fans cheering his name, it takes humility and strength to step into an entirely different world. No cameras, no pyro, no chants, just ordinary life. And maybe that's the lesson Maven's journey teaches us. Even when life takes an unexpected turn, starting over is always possible. Today, Maven occasionally reconnects with fans through interviews and appearances, but his normal job remains a big part of his identity. To longtime WWE watchers, it's both shocking and oddly comforting to know that someone who once stood in the middle of Madison Square Garden can now be found living the same kind of life as the rest of us. Wrestler. Virgil. In the golden days of WWE, Virgil was known as the right-hand man of the million-dollar man, Ted DiBiase. Fans remember him carrying the legendary million-dollar championship, assisting DiBiase in his feuds, and even breaking away to earn a wave of respect on his own. For years, Virgil's character was part of the spectacle, tied deeply into one of wrestling's most iconic gimmicks. But as time passed and WWE evolved, Virgil's spotlight slowly dimmed. After his in-ring career wound down, Virgil didn't transition into Hollywood, big business, or high-profile coaching roles like many of his peers. Instead, his life after wrestling took a much more grounded and, at times, surprising direction. For a period, Virgil was reported to have taken on work in everyday service roles, including stints in the food industry. Fans were stunned to hear about him reportedly working at an Olive Garden restaurant, a job that, while ordinary, showed just how different life can be once the bright lights of the arena fade away. This wasn't the glamorous retirement story that people expect when thinking about a wrestler who once performed in front of tens of thousands. Yet, it speaks volumes about the unpredictability of wrestling careers. The transition from being recognized by millions to living a quieter, normal life can be jarring. But Virgil's path also highlights a truth that many often overlook. When the cameras shut off, these larger-than-life characters are human beings, looking for stability and purpose just like everyone else. Virgil's story also became something of an internet phenomenon. Over time, memes and online jokes began to spread about his post-wrestling life, sometimes unfairly poking fun at the contrast between his past fame and his quieter present. And while the tone of these jokes was often harsh, there was also a strange kind of admiration in how fans continued to talk about him. In their own way, people were keeping his name alive in pop culture, even if it wasn't in the way he might have originally imagined. But beyond the memes and headlines, Virgil represents a narrative that fans rarely get to see. The reality that fame doesn't last forever, and that sometimes life after wrestling looks nothing like the world of main events and championship belts. His story resonates with anyone who has ever had to start over, reinvent themselves, or step into a new role that felt worlds apart from their first dream. Even today, Virgil occasionally appears at conventions and fan events, where nostalgia brings him face to face with the people who still remember his time in the ring. And for many fans, meeting him in person isn't about where he works now. It's about remembering a character that played a part in their childhood. In that way, Virgil's legacy endures, reminding us that every superstar, no matter how bright or brief their spotlight, has a story worth telling. Wrestler Perry Saturn. Perry Saturn was one of the toughest and most underrated performers of his generation. Fans from the late 90s and early 2000s remember him as part of the Radicals alongside Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit. Inside the ring, Saturn was respected for his hard-hitting style, unique move set, and willingness to put his body on the line. Yet behind the curtain, his journey was filled with twists that eventually led him far away from the bright lights of WWE. After leaving wrestling, Saturn's life took a series of difficult turns. He struggled with personal issues, including substance battles and financial hardships. For years, news about him seemed grim. He was reported missing at one point, sparking concern among fans and the wrestling community. Unlike some wrestlers who seamlessly transitioned into coaching or entertainment, Saturn's story reflected the harsh side of life after wrestling. The sudden lack of structure, the loss of steady income, and the difficulty of finding purpose beyond the squared circle. But what makes Saturn's story so striking is not just the hardship, but the resilience. Eventually, he resurfaced, sharing his struggles openly. Instead of hiding his reality, he spoke about the importance of overcoming addiction, rebuilding life, and facing adversity head-on. And in doing so, Saturn gave fans something deeper than entertainment. He offered an honest look at what happens when the dream fades and real life sets in. Today, Saturn lives a quieter life, far away from the chaos of the wrestling world. Reports say he has worked normal jobs, including service roles and day-to-day labor, that couldn't be more different from the glitz of WWE. For fans who once saw him suplexing opponents on global television, the idea of him leading such a modest life may feel surreal. Yet it also makes him relatable. He's a reminder that even warriors in the ring are human beings who, at some point, have to clock into regular jobs just like everyone else. The emotional pull of Saturn's story lies in the transformation, from a man who was once a feared competitor to someone living quietly among us, doing what needs to be done to survive. There's inspiration in that journey, too. Not because it's glamorous, but because it's real. Many viewers who struggle with their own challenges can look at Saturn and think, if he can endure all of that and still stand tall, maybe I can get through my battles, too. Perry Saturn may never headline a Hall of Fame ceremony or appear in blockbuster films, but his legacy is more profound than it seems. He represents perseverance, the reality of post-wrestling life, and the dignity of simply surviving. And for those who followed his career, seeing him today, alive, resilient, and grounded, is proof that even when the spotlight dims, the story doesn't end. Wrestler Rick Steiner. Rick Steiner, famously known as the dog-faced gremlin, was once one of the most intense and hard-hitting competitors in the wrestling ring. Fans of the late 80s and 90s remember him best as one half of the legendary Steiner brothers tag team, alongside his younger brother, Scott Steiner. Together, they were a dominant force in WCW, NJPW, and later in WWE, known for their suplex-heavy offense and raw power. But while Scott chose to remain in the spotlight longer, Rick took a very different path, one that surprised almost everyone. After retiring from full-time wrestling, Rick Steiner transitioned into a completely normal career. Instead of continuing in the wrestling business or chasing the entertainment spotlight, Rick went into real estate. Yes, the same man who once barked at opponents and slammed them with belly-to-belly suplexes found a second life helping families buy homes and manage property deals. For many fans, this shift felt almost unthinkable. Wrestling's wild, dog-faced gremlin now wore suits, held meetings, and worked with clients in his local community. What's even more fascinating is that Rick didn't treat this new career as a fallback. He treated it with the same intensity and focus that made him a great wrestler. He built a reputation in real estate as a hard-working and trustworthy businessman, showing that success isn't limited to the world of entertainment. His story reminds audiences that life after wrestling doesn't have to be tragic or full of setbacks. It can be about reinvention and growth. Beyond real estate, Rick also served in public office. He was elected to the Cherokee County Board of Education in Georgia, where he contributed to shaping policies for local schools. This career twist added another layer to his identity. The same man who once fought for championship belts was now fighting for the betterment of children's education. It gave fans a completely new perspective on him, not just as an athlete, but as a community leader. For fans, Rick Steiner's post-wrestling journey is both surprising and refreshing. Unlike many wrestling veterans who face hardship after their careers end, Rick carved out a stable and respected life. This makes his story engaging because it breaks the stereotype that wrestlers always end up struggling once the spotlight fades. Instead, it shows that with discipline and focus, reinvention is possible, no matter how intense or theatrical your first career might have been. Rick's transformation resonates with a wide audience. For wrestling fans, it's fascinating to see one of their childhood heroes succeed in such a normal, everyday profession. For non-fans, it's an inspiring reminder that change is possible, even after years in one career. And for everyone, it's comforting to know that people we once saw as larger than life are, at the end of the day, just like us, building families, working jobs, and giving back to their communities. Rick Steiner's story is proof that wrestling may have been his past, but it doesn't define his entire future. His second act is one of stability, responsibility, and community service, and that's just as admirable as anything he ever did in the ring. Wrestler Diamond Dallas Page, DDP. Diamond Dallas Page was one of the most unlikely success stories in professional wrestling. Starting his in-ring career in his mid-30s, an age when most wrestlers were already well established, DDP broke the mold. With sheer determination, charisma, and incredible self-belief, he went on to become a three-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion and one of the most popular stars of the late 90s. Fans loved his underdog story and his ability to connect with crowds through his energy, resilience, and his famous diamond cutter finisher. But what makes DDP's story truly remarkable isn't just what he did inside the ring, but what he built after his wrestling career ended. Instead of fading away or struggling with retirement, DDP reinvented himself completely. He became the founder of DDP Yoga, a fitness and lifestyle program that blended yoga techniques with athletic conditioning. What began as a personal recovery tool for his own back and spinal injuries grew into a worldwide movement. DDP Yoga wasn't just about stretching or exercise. It became a life-changing practice for thousands of people. Former athletes, everyday individuals, and even fellow wrestlers like Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall credited DDP with helping them regain their health and reclaim their lives. Fans who once watched him perform in the squared circle now watched him transform lives outside of it. His story became a beacon of hope, showing that reinvention after wrestling is not only possible but can be incredibly impactful. In many ways, DDP's post-wrestling journey redefined what a normal job could look like. While it's not your average 9-to-5 office role, it's a career that's firmly outside the wrestling bubble. He became a fitness entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and health advocate. From appearing on talk shows to hosting workshops, DDP became as well known for his yoga as he was for his championship reigns. His ability to connect with people on a personal level made him relatable, even to those who had never watched wrestling before. For fans, DDP's story is deeply inspiring. It reflects not just survival after wrestling, but thriving in a completely new world. He showed that a wrestler's second act doesn't have to be smaller or less significant than their first. In fact, for DDP, it might even be bigger. His ability to save lives through fitness and positivity has earned him a different kind of legendary status, one that stretches far beyond the ring. The emotional weight of DDP's journey lies in its positivity. Instead of letting injuries or setbacks define him, he built something that gave purpose to both himself and countless others. For viewers, his story creates a mix of nostalgia and motivation. Nostalgia, because they remember cheering for him in WCW. Motivation because they see how he turned personal struggle into global impact. Diamond Dallas Page may have left the wrestling ring, but his influence is felt every day through the lives he touches. His second career proves that reinvention is possible at any age, and that even after the spotlight fades, you can shine in new ways.